Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Board Game Buffet podcast, episode number 96. My name is Dean.
This is Graham.
Graham, number 96, end of July. This year is moving along at a pretty fast pace. It's actually, I didn't realize that it was going to go this fast. Maybe it's because things are getting back to somewhat normal, that people are out and about and enjoying things. But this year has been flying by. We are on the cusp of episode number 100, so that's kind of exciting. But I wanted to ask you a question, and it kind of is related to a situation that I just had. So I had ordered some games back in the fall of last year, like November of last year. And I ordered some from a company. I got them, and I didn't actually open a couple of them until just recently, about a month and a half ago. And when I opened it up, I was setting it up on the board, and I realized, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't the right game board. This isn't the right map for the game. And I was a little hesitant to reach out to the company, to the publisher, and ask them for a replacement part, because it had been so long since I'd ordered it. And I know that happens a lot. People order games, they don't open them. Happens a lot for me. But I was hesitant, because I'm like, well, is that really? I know it was their fault that I got the wrong map, but is it still on them 6 months later to correct the issue? So I reached out to them, and they were very nice. They sent me a replacement map for the game and everything. But it just got me to thinking, okay, I think that's the first time I've ever had to ask for something to be replaced. But as a consumer, or as a someone in the hobby, is there a statute of limitations? Is there a, not only a statute of limitations, but is there a protocol, or I guess just a social contract of when you should ask for replacement parts? Now, this, I needed to actually play the game. But sometimes it seems like people ask for stuff because, like, maybe one of the meeples is broken, or stuff like that. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it runs the gamut of people that will make do with whatever they have, to the people that say, the plastic insert is slightly damaged. Can I get a new game? Because, I want my game to be perfect. I know for myself, you said it's only happened to you once. It's happened to me at least 4 times, where and 3 of the times I contacted the company, and I want to talk about the last one to see what you would have done. So the only times I've contacted the company is like yourself, when it affects the gameplay. Perfect example was when I got my version of Viticulture. Viticulture, you have the different wooden meeples, like for the trellis and the whatever else. Well, I had extra pieces for one color. Like, I had 3 white trellises, for example, but then I didn't have a blue trellis, and I didn't have a blue windmill, for example. So I had mismatches of pieces. I had the right quantity of pieces, but I didn't have the right pieces themselves. Contacted Stonemaier, no problem. They sent me the new pieces that I needed. Another game, I believe it was Castle Dukes. I opened up the rule book, and it was, okay, each person has their player board. Then you put the main board in the middle that keeps track of the card costs. It's one of these things when the cards kind of shift down, and the first card's more expensive than the last card. I'm looking through the box going, I just don't have this board. So we actually drew one to make the game work. Mm-hmm. And I actually left it for a couple of months thinking that was fine. But I got thinking, I really should contact them to see whether I can get a replacement board, because it's not that the board was damaged. It's not like, I need to flatten out. I just did not physically have the board, and it should have come with the game. And yes, I can use my drawn one, but I really would like to have the one. So I contacted them. No problem. We'll send it out to you. A month or 2 later. Hey, have you sent out my replacement yet? Oh yeah, I sent it down, but for some reason it hasn't been sent. I'll make sure that they send it out. A month later, hey, have you sent out my replacement board? Oh yeah, it was because it's a very small company. I'm assuming it's a like a 1 or 2 person job and the printing is done by someone else. I eventually did get it. And that was fine. The last one I want to ask you about. So I think if it's the gameplay, then yes, I think you should contact them. And I think it shouldn't matter how old the game is up to a point. If because quite often you go into your local game store and they have games that go back 2, 3, 4 years. Kind of a follow-up question to that is how far back are they required to have replacement parts? So the game you bought 6 months since you ordered it, but if you ordered it as a new game, then I would expect them to have the extra boards to give you. If you went to the local game store and you picked up a game from 2015, it's brand new, sealed in the box, but it's an older game, and you brought it home and you opened it up and it was missing a board or had the wrong board in it, would you still expect the company to give you a replacement for it? It's a 6-year-old game. Let's say it didn't do there's only one print run. And my understanding is when they do a print run, most companies will produce extras basically for spare parts.
Right.
But if they've gone through them, would you still expect them to do a special print run just for you to get the board?
No, I think in a situation like that, if it's out of print and they don't have the replacement parts available, if the game was totally unplayable at that point in time, I would try to take it back to the point of purchase and just explain to them, I know that it's not their fault per se, but you did try, because usually if you go back to the local game store, they'll say, well, you need to take it up to the publisher. We don't handle that. But if the publisher doesn't support it anymore and it's not working, then I would think you should be able to return it as long as it's within the 30 days that you purchased it or whatever.
Right.
And if they didn't, then I think you could probably have a complaint. Maybe if you bought it with a credit card. Now, if you waited like me 6 months, I can't take it back to the point of purchase. If I bought it in a store. Luckily for me, mine was print on demand, so I could get whatever. But yeah, I mean, I could see where that would be an issue if it prevented me from being able to play the game. But I don't think it's a publisher. I mean, that's like saying, well, my refrigerator stopped working. I need this piece. Yeah, we don't make that model of refrigerator anymore. We don't have those pieces in stock. I mean, it's not their, it's not their duty to keep stuff in stock for 20 years just because, you might need a replacement piece.
Yeah.
I mean, I had Kemet. I bought Kemet and it was missing one of the tokens. And I looked, it had been punched out. And I looked, it just wasn't there. And I bought it new. And luckily it was a token that it wasn't a unique token. There were a couple tokens, that were all the same. It was just one of them. So all I did was I just took it and I scanned it and I printed it out in color. And then I cut it out and then I just mounted it on a little thicker, piece of cardboard. Because it's not like that worked for me because, it's not like you're drawing chits out of a bag where if I could feel the difference, oh, I know what that is. It didn't affect the gameplay. And so I was fine with that.
So going on with that, when you're talking about the chit, that it wasn't one I'm going to be drawing out of the bag. So the other one I want to ask you about is my version of Saboteur. So Saboteur is a card game. It's fairly old. It's been reprinted many times, but it's a hidden role game. And you're going to be playing cards to build up the mine to do whatever. My cards are the backs of the cards, so the side that everyone else sees are misprinted. It's almost as if where they were cut or where they were, because the text side is fine. The backs of the cards are all shifted. So the first one would be here. The second one is going to be slightly over, and the third one is going to be slightly over. And so there's a progression of the thing on the back of the card. So I can, if you played it a few times, I would know what cards you have in your hand based on just the backs of your cards. What I ended up doing was sleeving the cards. So in that situation, what would you have done? Would you have contacted the publisher to say, the game still technically functionally works, but it now doesn't work the way it's supposed to work? Like there's no missing components, there's no broken pieces or whatever else. You have all the cards that are the action side are fine, but it's the backs of the cards where the misprint was, that you could have other people know what cards you have in your hand based on the backs of the cards.
Yeah, I don't know for that one because I mean, were they that noticeable, or was
Yeah,
it something that you had? Because a lot of times I only know of a misprint or something if I read it on a forum, because I don't analyze my games that closely to be able to notice that there's that there's something off skew or whatever. So
this was noticeable because if you think of a back of a card, so it's like
right.
a black picture of a miner, I believe it is, like a dwarven
Hmm.
miner with a white border around it. So that black picture and the white border starts to move. So as soon as it starts to move too far, you then see the next. Like
Gotcha.
if you think of it's being printed like on a sheet of paper,
Yeah.
and they're all starting to shift over, then the next one will start to bleed into the first card. So you can see if it's a full bordered card, then it's probably A, B, or C, because those are the only ones that have full bordered. If it's half the dwarven miner's face on this side of the card and half it's on that side, then it's probably this series of cards.
Right. Yeah. I don't. I mean, I guess. I mean, for me, I'm not sure if I play my games enough to where I would memorize or be able to memorize what it is. Um, but if you're playing it a lot and it's definitely something that you would notice, I could see that you would maybe want to get a reply. I don't know. I'm not sure contacting the publisher though is going to help you, because if it's their entire print run that's that way, I don't know how they could replace them. But sleeving them probably would be the easiest thing, like you did. And sometimes I go with the path of least resistance. I can sleeve them and be done with it and play the game, or I have to send an email and then I got to follow up on the email. And well, now I got to look, especially if I ordered it online, directly from the, okay, well, here's my original invoice number. And I don't know what you would have to do if you just bought it from like a local game store. Do you have to send them in a copy of the receipt? Do they ever give pushback? I've only done it the one time and it was dealing directly with the publisher who I bought it from. So it wasn't that big of a deal. I don't want to have to jump through that many hoops to just get a replacement part. I know there are other people that, they're like you said, they want their collection to be pristine. They want their games to be pristine. And maybe I have a lot more games that
Yeah, we really
that
we
need
really don't
replacement
know.
parts because I don't open that, I don't just open them up and look at them. So I could have hundreds of games at this point in time where I'm missing parts and everything else. But like if I open up a game and they have the little vacuum form plastic inserts, half the time some of those are cracked
Yeah.
or whatever. I don't care. There's a good chance. I mean, I'm throwing out an insert anyways. If it, especially if it's just a cardboard insert, I generally don't keep them. Um, I guess I'm interested to. So what about if you, because I see people, they'll say, oh well, I bought this game off of somebody and it's missing this piece or whatever. And I contacted the publisher and they don't seem to want to give me the piece. It's like
Yeah.
that's not their responsibility. If you don't buy it new, I don't see why you would think that someone else should replace your missing pieces or damaged pieces or whatever.
Yeah, and I don't buy used games.
I know.
I have bought a few. When I let my guard down, I bought a few, but my assumption is when you're buying used games, you're getting a deal on them. Like very rarely, unless it's like a Grail game or a game that's out of print that you really, really want, you're more than likely getting some sort of discount off the MSRP. And in my mind, in that case, you're taking a risk that it could come with not all the components. If you want the complete game where you have a warranty on your game, then you need to buy it new. If you're buying it secondhand, you are taking the risk, and it's not the publisher's responsibility to replace it. It would have been the original owner. So either the owner lost it or the owner deemed that it wasn't necessary to contact the publisher or the original owner,
Right.
purchaser. So for me, if you're buying a secondhand game and you're missing components, the publisher, in my opinion, has nothing to do with that copy of the game, because the publisher has got no money from you buying that game.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so when I saw a lot of games at our flea market at my local con, and I think for the most part, I probably go through I definitely don't go through all the games before I sell them to make sure they're all there. I'm assuming that they're all there if they're, well, one, if they're in shrink, but also if I've opened them, if I've played them, because I don't have like a lost and found box with chits and stuff in it. So I'm assuming I'm not missing anything. But again, it's if you're buying it used, if I'm buying it used, I buy a lot of used games. If the person says, yeah, everything should be there, then I'm assuming everything should be there. And if not, well, it's still buyer beware. It's like going to a garage sale and and buying something. I don't even, you said warranty. I have a tough time with even accepting that the publisher that when you buy a game new, that there's a warranty to it. I mean, I
I
know that you should get things in working order,
Yes. And that's what I
but
meant. That's what I meant by warranty, not that it's going to last for 6 months. I'm assuming when you break that shrink and you go through the table of contents in the rule book, that will match what's actually in the box.
yeah, but see, I don't know, like especially now with Euro games and especially ones with lots of meeples, you know, and they're getting fancy with their meeple styles, and some of them have like little thin parts of their meeples where I don't know, maybe it's a staff, or maybe it's got a feather on top, whatever, and sometimes those will come and they'll be broken. I don't. I mean, do you think that's the responsibility of the publisher to replace that to you?
I think I think it depends on the quantity of them, because I do have some games that have misshapen meeples. I know there's one where I have half a meeple. I think in some that's for me that's a very tough one. If I had a game that, let's say it was armies versus armies, and you had a whole bunch of meeple archers that were holding bows, and against the wizards who were holding staves. If one of the wizards or one of the archers had a broken thing, I'd probably live with it. If all my wizards had broken staves, then I probably would go back to the publisher, because I don't. In that case, I don't think the publisher has done their job properly, and they should be called out for it, because they've designed something. When you design something, you should be designing for some level of robustness, that people are going to be using these pieces, and they should be able to hold up to some sort of wear. So if they come completely broken, then I think it is the publisher's responsibility to come up with a new solution, because the one that they sold you didn't work. If it's one broken piece, no, I mean, you could have dropped it on the floor. I mean, that's
Right. Yeah, and if it's all the pieces, if it was meeples, I could see them saying, yeah, we can replace those. But say they were plastic bits, and if it's a bad production run, or maybe it was a bad flaw in the design, maybe they made it just too thin or whatever. I don't see how I don't think that they're going to replace those, because if that would require a whole new production run, they'd have to redesign it. And I would just see most players saying, you know what, it's still functioning. It maybe not be aesthetically um, pleasing to you.
but that comes to, I think, a conversation you and I have had before around Kickstarters and first editions of games. Does that mean that there is some trepidation buying a first edition of a game? Because that first edition of a game that has those type of meeples in it that people complain about, oh, all the stabs on my wizards were broken because the design of the piece wasn't good. Then all the publisher says, okay, in version 2, in addition to, in the next reprint, we'll make them thicker, which means all the people that bought it the first time, sorry, you're out of luck. Thanks for your money. Thanks for pointing out where we should have done better. Now we'll take your suggestions, and for the next people that buy it, they'll get the improved version of it.
Yeah.
Are you saying that they don't have any responsibility to the people that first bought the game?
I'm saying it doesn't hurt the functionality of the game. Yes, it's probably not what you were expecting, but I think Kickstarter also probably, tells you that things may change,
Yeah.
and not that, hey, here's a picture of something really good and now we're just going to make it really crappy. That's not their intent. I'm saying it doesn't hurt the functionality, and I'm not sure that it would make me more nervous about backing Kickstarter, but I would maybe be more nervous about supporting that company again in the future. If they can't produce it correctly. But I just think of, as a publisher, if you had to, if you had to rerun an entire production line of, especially of plastics, which means you have to do the redesign and they have to retool everything, that would probably put a small publisher out of business.
Okay, so let me ask you this then. So let's say you got a new game and your staff was broken. If you went online and you were the only person whose game came with a broken staff, is your opinion different than if everybody in the forum said, someone posts my broken staff and you see, 100 other people saying, yes, my staff is broken too? Would you join in with them to hopefully get the publisher to do something for you? Or if you were the one-off, would you ask the publisher to do something for you? Like, does one side lead more credence to you contacting the publisher saying, hey, can you do something for me?
No, I don't think I'd contact them either way. I don't think, I'm assuming if there's that many people complaining about it, my one single voice isn't going to tip it over the edge. So I'm probably just going to move on. If I get something fixed and replaced, then that's great. I think of a company like GMT. GMT is really good about sending out either corrected bits, chits, maps, whatever, if something is not correct. They may do it all at one time where they fix things for like 3 games and then send them but they send them to the backers that backed through their company, through their P500. They'll automatically get stuff sent to them because they have their address and everything on order. I don't know what they do for the people that purchase it in retail. If you have to prove that you purchase, I don't know, because I've never really done it. But I do know as a company, they're generally pretty proactive in it. Because let's face it, mistakes happen.
Yeah.
But again, I also think of a game like Mirage, and the people that backed it on Kickstarter, there was that whole issue with the wheels. They didn't work. They were warped, whatever the case may be. I get that they were upset. I get that, they maybe, I don't know if it hurt the functionality of the game or not. But I also don't know if I agree that it's the publisher's responsibility to just then correct it and send it out to everyone who backed it. I don't know.
Well, look at Seventh Continent. So Seventh Continent I backed on Kickstarter. And I was the second group of, so they've done a multiple Kickstarter. So I was in the second Kickstarter, not the original one. I can't remember where the original one had this issue or not. I don't think it did, but the second printing, you have a stack of cards that you're going through and you are seeding curse cards into there. The curse cards were slightly darker blue than the regular cards. So when you're drawing through the deck, if you paid enough attention and had good enough light, you could tell that the next card was a curse card. Because part of the game is drawing cards, like kind of a bit of push your luck. Like I'm going to draw 5 cards and you're kind of going 1, 2, oh, it's a curse. It's going to screw my thing up. They reprinted and sent everybody an entirely new set of cards. So I essentially ended up with 2 full sets of the cards, and I actually gave a set to Dean. Now he doesn't have the minis, but whatever, who cares? So he can now play it, and as long as he plays it in dimmer light, you probably won't see the curse. And I was very surprised that Serious Pulp did that, because it was like, well, why can't you just reprint the curses? Like you reprinted all the cards and gave everybody a second set of cards. I'm thinking that must have cost you a fortune to redo, unless they had an agreement with the public, like the actual people that produced it, and they were able to show that you guys were negligent in printing this,
right? And
then you're kind of putting on to the actual people that actually produced the things. But that one surprised me, and that one was funny because when you were saying you wouldn't contact the publisher, I was fine with my game as is, because I'm not going to be playing this game so often that I'm going to be looking for those cards. And like you, until someone pointed out that the colors were different, I then picked up the 2 cards and went, oh yeah, they are kind of different. I hadn't noticed the first 2 times I played this.
Right.
So I was fine with the way it is, but they sent me another copy. I'm like, okay, I'll take it. That one to me was questionable, but there's so much uproar over that the game was now unplayable because you could see these different colored curse cards. I'm like, I kind of see where you're coming from, but I also don't think it is as big a deal as you're making it out to be.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I mean, if you're the type of person that wants to get all the, everything replaced so that it's pristine and it's something that was at the fault of the publisher, I have no problem with that. Maybe I'm just too lazy to want to have to go through that hassle.
But
And I also don't play my games enough to have to worry about it. I mean,
that's just what I was going to say, is that because you and I go through so many games so quickly, some people buy 1 or 2 games a year. And if I was in that boat, I would damn want to make sure that the game I'm buying is perfect.
yeah.
Because
And
because of that, I would say in that serious pulp thing, if that was the only thing I bought, that because it was an expensive
sure,
Kickstarter,
absolutely.
I would definitely be going back saying, you know what, this is my one purchase a year of 5, whatever it is. You guys better replace this because I plan to spend the next 6-8 months playing this game.
Right.
Because I'm really interested. I really love it. Whatever else, I want it so I can play it to its full extent. I shouldn't have to squint. Shouldn't have to turn on the lights in my room to make sure I'm not seeing the curse cards. I want it to be perfect, and I think you're completely within your rights to demand that from a publisher.
Correct. But I don't think you're within your rights if you bought the game used. If you bought it used,
Yes,
that's not on the publisher.
I don't think you can take my my edition of Seventh Continent and go back to Serious Pulp and demand a new copy of it.
And I also don't. So my version of the Voyages of Marco Polo, I never noticed it until I was playing it with Dan one time, and we were looking up a rule, and I'm looking through the rule book, and it's talking about whatever, and I'm looking on the board, I'm like, and it was referring to some areas that were in blue. I think it was blue. I'm looking at my game board, I'm like, these areas are not blue, they're brown on my game board. And I'm looking at the rule book and I'm looking at my board and I'm looking, and I don't remember where I bought this game. I know I bought it new, but I'm thinking, did I buy this from a game store? Did I buy it off of Amazon? Because I think it's a counterfeit. I think it's a counterfeit game. I just think because, and I never saw anything on the forums about there being a misprint from the publisher, but this game board I have, unless it's a misprint in the rule book where they have bad photos and bad text, I'm thinking that mine's a bootleg copy.
Hmm.
And I mean, I would never have the goal to then, call, I think it was Z-Man who put it out and say, hey, I need a replacement board for this because, mine doesn't match. I mean, maybe they would say, oh yeah, you have a counterfeit copy, but that's the only one where it doesn't hurt the functionality of the game as once I realized that the colors didn't match up to what it was saying. But it was interesting. So yeah, I don't know. I'm probably just too lazy to have to worry about it. But now I'm starting to think maybe I really should go and open up a lot more games. But even so, I don't think I would ever. I mean, again, it gets back to the statute of limitations.
Yeah.
If it's not supported anymore, and maybe if it wasn't a big selling game, maybe they still do have replacement parts for it. But I see a lot of people that are really up in arms at times over trying to get replacement parts or, posting that, I bought this game brand new and look, this piece is broken. Or I was like, well, shit happens. I mean, those inserts are not really, I mean, they're designed for the shipping portion of the game, but let's face it. I mean, stuff rattles around or when people pack it, or it comes off off the assembly line.
Because I have probably about 900 games now, 850, 900 games. I have of that because I open up all my games and go through everything whenever I buy them. I think out of that, there's less than I can count on my hand of games that I have opened that were unplayable in the condition that they were. Like I said, I think Viticulture, and there's one other game that I was missing things for that I bought around the same time. Those are the only 2 games out of 800 and something games that have ever been in an unplayable state when I opened them brand new. So I think for me, that is so small.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's face it. I think 98% of the time, publishers do a great job of getting you exactly what you ordered or what you expect.
Yeah.
Stuff happens.
Yeah.
I don't think anything is ever done maliciously. Now, maybe there are times where they notice it and they just say, you know what, let's just run with it. if 5% come back wanting changes, we'll give them replacement parts. Now for me with your viticulture one, I think when you were telling me or talking about it, my initial thought was, well, I would have just gotten out my paints and just would have painted the two white ones blue and been done with it.
But then I didn't have, so if I had 3 trellises that were white, I was missing a blue trellis, but I was also missing a blue other piece, which I didn't have any spares for.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. The only other time, and we're going to move on after this, but I don't remember when it started, this trend, I guess, of the different size either resources or the different size meeples. Like you have the normal ones, which are ones, you get the bigger ones, which are worth 5. I remember when those things first came out, I'm thinking, look at the meeples aren't even the right size. Like I got big ones, I got small ones. Like, what's going on in this game? Because I assumed that was just a misprint when it first came out.
I'm not a big fan of that.
No, I'm not either. I
Because
mean, I get why they do it, but
but I always find it's like this size for ones and that size for 5s. It's like, okay,
right.
So unless you're kind of holding them two together, it's like, okay,
Right.
yeah, this is a 5, this is a 1. But when I look at Dean's pile, it's like, okay, which ones are 5s, which ones are 1s? I can't tell from, because they're not different enough.
Right. And when I watch Graham take resources or stuff out of the dish, and he mistakenly takes the bigger one when he meant to take the smaller one, and all of a sudden he's got 25 apples and he should only have 5 apples. Yeah. Fool me once.
But I think I would love to hear what our listeners and viewers have to say about this one, because even within Dean and I, there's kind of a gamut of situations where we would and wouldn't. And I guess the other question is it your right to have an absolute perfect game when you open it? So,
Right.
and anything that's wrong, there's a slight crease in the rule book. Do you go back? Should you go back? Or do you feel that you have the right to go back, whether you do it or not? Do you feel that you have the right to go back to the publisher and say, look, the front page of my rule book is all creased up. Can you send me another copy?
Yeah. That yeah, I mean, the way that I kind of fold my rule books or whatever and stuff. I mean, yeah. I just don't think that I don't view mine as a museum quality collection.
But
I laugh at people who I saw someone post on Facebook the other day. They were selling some games. They're like, this is like collector's grade A++. It's like, dude, first off, the games you're selling are crap. And secondly, I mean, you're selling it on Facebook. It's not like you went out and sent it and got it graded like a comic book or a baseball card. It's a freaking board game.
But we should probably finish this conversation. But for you like to sometimes put the box covers up on the wall as a piece of art.
Mm-hmm.
If you bought a game that had a damaged front corner on it that you really wanted to put up on what would you do for that? Would you just say, I'm not going to put it on my wall? Would you put it up damaged? Or would you go back to the publisher and say, hey, can you send me a completely new game because of one little corner is
I mean, if I'm putting it up, it's because of the art. I mean, I'd put it up if it was damaged. I mean, I buy stuff ding and dent at game stores. I have a couple games that, the whole front cover, the whole front of the box is smushed in, but the inside was fine. That, I know you would never buy that. But for me, it's like, whatever, I can get the game for $10 versus $50. I don't care what the cover looks like. But I get the art point. We just have different approaches to it.
Yeah, and I'm sure we are probably closer than some of the other outliers that we've seen, like the people that say, I want a completely new game because my rule book is folded.
Yeah, and I know one of our listeners, Tom, I think he backed Barrage on Kickstarter. So it'd be interesting if he would chime in about his thoughts on that whole Kickstarter with the wheels and everything else, because I don't know if they sent replacement parts out for people or if they just had to suck it up and be done with it. I don't remember. I didn't back Barrage on Kickstarter. I bought it retail. I think the retail versions were all supposed to be fine. I don't know because mine's still in shrink, but I'm assuming it is. So yeah, let us know if what your thoughts are on it, because we could be way off base of what your opinion is. But again, if you are totally opposite of my opinion, where maybe you've gotten 100 replacement parts from things, that's fine because it's your collection, it's your games. I mean, I don't, I don't really have a dog in the fight other than what I'm going to do. And probably 90% of the time, it's just like, I'm just going to roll with it. And because I don't want the hassle of having to send emails and follow up with emails. And since I'm always gone, then I gotta, you know, I gotta, ask my wife, hey, did this arrive? Did this arrive? Hey, can you open it up and see what's in there? It's just not worth it to me. So,
Yeah, and I think it's come down to, do you use coupons for things? Are you always on the lookout for the sale? Some people love that. Some people like that extra. I think of extra work, but some people want to get the perfect whatever at the perfect price. You and I just tend to. It's probably bad on us. It's not very fiscally responsible. We will just go in and just buy what we want. We're not gonna go and we don't scour the internet to look for the local game store that has oh, we're having a 10% discount this weekend. If they're there and it's possible, we'll buy it, but we're not waiting for that. We'll just go and buy our game wherever. But that also means that both of us are probably don't have the personality to hound the publisher. Not even hound, just ask the publishers for replacement parts. Even if we are completely within our rights to do it, we tend not to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, don't get me wrong. I like finding a good deal. That's why I buy stuff, secondhand, flea markets, and stuff like that. But I'm also not the person that if you have a game that is already below MSRP and you're selling at a flea market, and let's say MSRP is 60 and you've got it for 30, I'm not going to come up and say, will you take 25? I'm already getting a deal, and I sell a lot of games that way, and it irritates me at times when people do that. It's like, dude, I've got the game for $10. You want to give me 8. I know that a lot of people are like, well, that's the whole point of a flea market is to negotiate. And generally my response is no, it's already priced to move. If you don't want to pay $10 for it, then, if $2 is going to make a difference, then I guess find something else. I'm not a patient seller. Let's say you either, you pay the price or move on. So anyways, that's gonna, I don't know how we, that's supposed to be a very simple question just because I've had to get a map replacement, but I think it was a good discussion. What about First Bite? You been getting any games played?
I haven't got a lot of games, but I do have one. It's actually an expansion. I know, me with an expansion.
Wow.
So we've talked about the game Bonfire on the podcast before. And if people may or may not know, I'm part of the Dice Tower reviewer stable, I guess. And the
sound like a hooker.
I'm thinking more of a horse, actually. So a part of that, they did a summer spectacular, and the expansion for Bonfire was announced by Pegasus Spiel. So I was actually sent a pre-production copy of the expansion for it, and I believe the expansion's coming out Essen timeframe. So Lel and I actually got a chance to play. She was excited to play it because she really enjoys Bonfire. So this is called the Trees and Creatures expansion, and it adds 3 modules to Bonfire. So I'm not going to go through how Bonfire works. I'll just quickly talk about how the expansions work. I'm assuming that you know how Bonfire works. So there's 3 modules. 2 of them are relatively simple. One of them is kind of a gameplay change, and it's the trees. You add an extra small board beside the main board, and you have a stack of 24 trees or 25 trees. I think it's 24 trees. And they're going to be color coded based on that match the bonfires. So the bonfires are blue, yellow, and red. So you have blue, yellow, and red trees. Because again, you want to try and match up the trees to the bonfire that's connected to it. But every time you do the procession, which is moving your guardians along the path, when they stop, you have 1 opportunity to buy a tree. So there'll be 3 face-up. There's technically 5 face-up trees, but you can only buy the first 3. So you can see the trees that are coming down. And they will cost resources. And when you buy one of the trees, you have to place it on a position of where your guardian is. So it can't go anywhere, but just where your guardian is. You can put any tree against any bonfire, but you're not going to score the bonus points at the end of the game unless they match. So yes, you could put a yellow tree on top of a red bonfire. That's fine. Still going to work. You're just not going to get the end of game scoring for it. The trees are going to give you three different types of things: either an instant effect, get resources, get action tiles; an ongoing effect, such as all your blue resources are now wild; or it could be an end game scoring. So if you have a guardian on this tree at the end, it's going to be score you 5 points. Or at the end of the game, all your blue bonfires are going to be worth 2 points more than what's printed on them. Very simple things like that. There's also going to be things on that board that you said at the beginning of the game. There's a spot for the 4 different colored guardians. You're going to put these little chits on those guardians that are going to give you a special ability when you're buying trees. So it could say that if you have the gray guardian and you buy a tree, he's going to give you a point, or he's going to give you like a basic resource. Again, those are very, very simple things, but they do make you think, oh, maybe I should get the pink guardian before I buy my next tree, because the pink guardian allows me to place the tree anywhere. It doesn't have to be where guardian is. So it definitely adds another layer of thinking that you have to do, but it's not a major change. It's not like you're going to sit down and say, wow, this is a completely different game. This is like Bonfire with this one extra thing you have to think about. I enjoyed that module, the trees module. The other two I haven't played with yet, but one is called creatures. At the beginning of the game, you're going to deal out the number of creatures equal to the number of players plus 2. So if you're playing a 3-player game, you're going to deal out 5. And the player who's in last position is going to take 2 of them, of the creatures, return 1 to the box and keep 1. Then the next player is going to take 2, and then so the first player get what's under left. The creatures are going to give you a permanent ability during the game. It could be one of the creatures allows you to, when you move your ship, you can move your ship wherever you want for 1 resource cube. Another one could be when you allows you to place novices on. So when you complete a bonfire, you can place a novice on a different action. Normally, each action can only have 1 novice of each color. Maybe you get the creature that allows you to put multiple of the same color on an action with the novices. So they are going to change the rules slightly, but once it's set for the beginning of the game, that's it. I mean, you have the creature and you have it like a starting ability, but doesn't affect anything else during the game except change that one rule for you. The last module are events. Events are always going to be good. And it could be that some of the events could be things like when you're paying resources, instead of paying 2, everybody just plays 1. The events are good for everyone at the table. So it's not just, oh, I get the special event. Their events are for the general table. And every time the first player has to put a new tile onto their fate board to get new action tiles, that's when the new event comes out. So you may only see 4, 5, 6 events during the entire game. And those are the 3 modules. So 2 of them I haven't played with yet, but they don't seem like there are major changes. It's the tree one for me, which is kind of adds a whole other level to Bonfire. And I enjoyed that. So like I said, I have a pre-production copy of it. So the components are not as nice as retail. I wonder when they go to retail, can I contact the publisher and get my pre-production copy exchange based on our previous discussion? But yeah, I think it's going to be one of those things, unless you love Bonfire and you've played it a lot, this isn't going to be one you need to buy with the base Bonfire, because it just adds, that next step for Bonfire that I don't think is critical to the gameplay.
Well, that was going to be my question. Do you think it's we throw around the term, it's a must-have expansion. I'll never play the game again without it. It doesn't sound like that's the case as far as, in your opinion, for people new to the game.
Yeah.
But now for you, would you ever play Bonfire again without the trees expansion?
I don't think so. I played Bonfire enough that both Lil and I have kind of gotten our head around how Bonfire works. When you sit down, we know what to do. Okay, we're going to be doing this, we're going to be doing that, we're going to be doing that. It's not that you get into a rut, but you know how the game works. You know how it's going to progress.
Right.
So adding those trees has given us something new to learn with that base game. So that's why, as of right now, I would, if it's Lil and I or people that have played Bonfire a fair bit, I would always play with the trees. If I was introducing the game to someone new, I would not play with the trees, because I feel that Bonfire has a fairly steep learning curve to it, that adding those trees is, okay, here's another thing you have to think about.
Sure.
It's too complex. So I would say it's not something you need to buy with the game, but if you have Bonfire, you enjoy it, you've played it a lot, I think trees is a good kind of next step to add to Bonfire.
Okay. So a couple questions then. You said when you're going to purchase the trees, You can purchase the first three, you see whatever five. Is the purchase cost of the trees, is it always the same amount of resources?
No,
Does it
so
fluctuate between first place and third place? Does it fluctuate on the color of the tree?
I don't understand. Again, this is pre-production. I don't know, not sure they're going to tweak the rules for this. So the board is kind of split into two halves. One that has place for 3 trees, and then a single face-up tree, and then the stack of trees. And the stack of trees is face up. It doesn't matter which of the first 3 trees you buy. The cost of the tree is printed on the tree.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter whether it's in 1, 2, or 3 position. That tree is always going to cost whatever's printed on. There's no, and you can buy any of the 3 for whatever price is printed. So the shifting doesn't seem to affect the cost of the bottom 3. There's no way to flush the trees. There's no way for me to pay extra to get that tree that's on display that's not in the sale pile yet. So I'm not exactly sure what the point of that is. Because yes, I can
see information.
Yeah, I can see it. It's like, well, I can't get it unless I buy one of the trees. That's the only way I can force it to come down.
Have you noticed that the cost of the trees, are they relatively just the same? It's just the type of resources that they require to purchase them? Or
No.
if a tree is worth, if this one's worth 3 victory points and this one's worth 2 victory points at the end of the game, the 3 victory point tree costs an extra resource?
Yes.
It's more expensive? Okay.
You do find that. So the ones that are pretty basic, the ones that may give you like 2 movement, like 2 of the blue ship tiles, action tiles, it's probably only going to cost you 1 resource. But the one that's going to be worth 5 points at the end of the game it will cost you 3 resources.
Okay.
Because it's definitely a more beneficial tile, and they make you pay more for the more beneficial tiles.
Gotcha. So then my other question, I mean, it's interesting because resources in that game can be pretty tight unless you do a really good job, on your player board with those action tiles that you're putting down, or resource tiles, whatever you want to call them, where you can chain them together and get the more resources. So it's interesting that it's costing you resources when I always thought that resources were fairly tight in the normal bonfire. But I guess again, it just depends on how well you use that player board, and then I guess how well you use your guardians.
It's
proceeding along there.
And that's so Lala was flush with resources when we played this, because she, at the beginning of the game, there was 2 of the cards out that allowed you to say every time you move the gray guardian where it ends up, you get double the resources. So there's 2 of them there. So she got those like the first 2 turns, and then she went after those guardians, and then she started to move the guardians. So each time, for 2 of the guardians she was moving, each time they stopped moving, she would get double the resources. So she had a whole pile of resources for the game. Right. She did a really, really good job of managing her guardians and making sure that she was moving the guardians that were going to give her the bonuses.
Right. Okay. My last question then is, because in Bonfire there is no set number of game turns, which I like. Which means it's not like you're still choosing between, do I want to do the trees? Do I want to do this action or that action? But it's not like you only have 5 game turns where it's going to be super punishing if you choose to do the trees versus, whatever, go out and get something off one of the islands. So my question is there like an extra little game piece or component that you put down? How you have the within the guardian, the ring around the dial, and it's got the different guardians out there. Does it increase the number of guardians that are out there?
You mean novices? The
novices that are out there.
So you do get there is an extra novice that's placed on the tree board that says if you get 7 trees, you can put that novice out. Okay. There's also another elder. So elder are the scoring cards you can buy during the game. There's another elder that's out there that you get 1 point per tree that you have. There's also 3 more tasks, like the bonfire tasks that are shuffled in that have to do with trees.
Okay. Does it change the in-game trigger? Because I think the in-game trigger, if there's like once 8 novices or something like that,
it's based on player count. But
okay.
If like for 2 to 3 players, I believe it's 7 novices. No, 2 players at 7 novices out. 3 players is 10, whatever. It doesn't change that, but it does mean that there is 1 more neutral novice that could go out if you completed all the trees. Also, the end of game scoring, you get 2 points for tree if it matches the bonfire. So if you have a red tree above a red bonfire, you get 2 extra points. There's also white trees that will match any color bonfire, so you get 2 points for those. And then there are some trees that will give you points at the end of the game. If your guardian is physically on this tree, so instead of moving them down to the bonfire, if you move them up to the tree, some trees will give you points to have that as well. So it gives you a couple extra ways to score points at the end of the game.
Okay. Well, it sounds like the expansions. I look forward to playing it. It sounds very interesting, and I think do you find it really draws the theme out of the game?
Well,
adding these trees.
If the base theme of a bonfire was here, on a scale of this just kind of takes up to like 11.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it because everyone knows gnomes and trees. I mean, there's such a connection. I can understand if they were druids. This game was about druids and trees.
Gnomes, trees, fires, and boats. I mean, what more thematic can you get from that?
It's like, well, you don't watch The Office, but it's like that. Bears beats Battlestar Galactica. All right, so that's Bonfire, Trees and Creatures.
Yeah.
All right, I look forward to it. I know a bunch of our listeners would look forward to it because they like Bonfire, they like Feld. So yeah, Essen time, you said.
Yeah, on the Board Game Geek page, I think that's what Pegasus Spiel said. It's going to be an Essen release this year.
All right, very cool. So the game that I want to talk about is a game that Graham and I played recently. And so I'm going to give a very, I'm going to present this game to you from the standpoint of it being more of a Euro game than a war game. Now, Graham and I have we've talked about this. We've recorded it. We haven't dropped that war game episode yet, but it is technically a war game, but it's also, it skews heavily towards the Euro. To the Euro side of gaming as well. So the game is called Supply Lines of the American Revolution, the Southern Strategy. And yes, technically it's a war game, but I would say this game is 75% supply and logistics and 25% fighting each other. And it's a very abstracted fighting. It's a midweight game, but it's a midweight game from the supply and logistics side. It's a very light war game. There's like maybe 3 or 4 rules you have to worry about from the fighting side. The rest of it is you are concentrating on the supply and logistics of this game. One side's playing the British, one side's playing the Americans, and it's all about forming your supply lines, keeping your supply lines open, and shifting those supplies to the different areas that you need to get them to. Your cities that you control will generate supplies, and the supplies in this game, there's 2 supplies. There's food and there's war supplies, and you need both of them to fight. You need the food to move. You need the food to survive any siege, but you need both of them to be effective. And there is a stacking limit or a supply limit that any city or fort can hold, and there's ways to modify your supplies that you get if you have a majority control in certain areas as well. But this game really is it's supply and logistics. It is one that I think when we played it, we thought, oh, it's a war game. We need to focus more on the fighting, and then we realized pretty early on, well, we've got to kind of step back from the fighting, and we've got to get our supply lines opened up. We got to be able to maintain them. It's not as hard to get them set up as it is to actually maintain them, especially from the British standpoint. But even from the American standpoint, I mean, you start to spread yourself pretty thin just trying to keep these supply lines open. And, Graham's a big supply and logistics guy. I mean, Rhine River Trade, is it Rhine River Trade or Rhine River Trader? Is one of his favorites. And I don't know if the supply lines or the logistics, that's probably more logistics than the supply lines.
Yeah.
You don't really have to worry about maintaining them, but in this one you have to maintain them and keep them open. But it's pretty easy to shift supplies wherever you want to go. It's just a matter of calculating out, okay, this is what I want to do. I'm going to need X amount of food to move, to fight. I'm going to need X amount of war supplies, because you use your war supplies to affect how many dice you're going to get to roll when you do fight. So I found it found it very interesting. I really enjoyed it. I want to play it again, and I think probably like yourself, I enjoy it more from the Euro side of the game than the war game. Overall, I enjoy it all together, but I think because it probably is 75-80 or 75-25 split, that 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 made it more enjoyable, at least for me.
Yeah, I think I would encourage people to listen to our war game episode on this, because we go into much more detail what we
Oh,
liked
absolutely.
and issues with that. And I think, yes, I think I did like it more than some of the other war games we played, because it is, I like logistics. I like the supply line aspect of it. And the war game was not minimized, but it was definitely a smaller piece of the gameplay. Your ultimate goal was to fight, but you spend more time planning, which is what I enjoy.
Yeah, and I think also from the from kind of a Euro-y
Yeah.
side of the game, um, the initiative track, or the not the initiative track, but the well, I guess they called it the initiative track.
Yeah.
So in this game, when you roll for initiative, there's this little track to the side, and the track goes from 0, and then it's like 0, 1, 2, and then 3 and 4 are together, and 5 and 6 are together. So at the beginning of the turn, we each roll a die. If I roll a 5 and Graham rolls a 1, well, I've won the initiative, and we put the initiative chit on the 5-6 box. And over the course of the turns, you're gonna, I'm gonna go, Graham's gonna go, I'm gonna go, Graham's gonna go. But you can choose to pass your main action. If Graham chooses to pass his main action, we move that chit down to now to the 4 box. And then if I take a turn and it comes back to Graham and he passes again, we move it down 1 more space. And what we found initially, we're like, well, I don't, whatever, what's the big deal? But what we found is that there was a little bit more cat and mouse to the game of, okay, do I want to pass my initiative and wait to see what he's going to do? But then I run the risk, because if your opponent immediately passes right after you, the turn's over automatically and you move on to the next year. So it's kind of a little bit of a gamble, but you can use it to maybe garner a little more information. So I did find that part also to be pretty unique about the game that I enjoyed. And combining that with the supply and logistics, to me, like I said, it's, even though it's labeled a war game, it's definitely it could have easily just been listed as a strategy game on BGG. Um, and I think that if you do like supply and logistics, or you do kind of like that's if you're into strategy games, don't get scared off because it's listed as a war game. And if you want to know more about it, please, check out the wargaming episode that'll be on the YouTube channel, because we go into a lot more depth and detail. And maybe it would be something for you. Maybe it won't be something for you. Maybe it'll be too much war game, even though it's only about 25% of the game. I was, like I said, I think I was pleasantly surprised by it because I hadn't played it before, and I think Graham enjoyed it too. But yeah, I don't have a whole lot more to say, because I don't want to get down in the weeds about it. Because we could go on and on. I think we talked about it for an hour or so on the YouTube video. So, anyways, that is Supply Lines of the American Revolution, the Southern Strategy. And there is a game called the Supply Lines of the American Revolution, the Northern Strategy, which came out before it, same company. It's put out by Hollandspiel. And I haven't played that one, but it plays a little bit different, but it's another one of those supply and logistics with some war game in it. So
Yeah, and I'm eager to get the Southern strategy back to the table, but I also do want to try the Northern one as well.
all right, well, we can do that. And it's not available on Tabletopia. It's available on Vassal, but it's also, I looked there, they sell for $35 direct from the publisher at Hollandspiel. So it's a pretty cheap price point. They print on demand. And if you bought both of them, because Hollandspiel boxes are really thin, I don't think the shipping would be outrageous. Getting both of them combined, it probably would be the same cost, whether you ordered one or the other. But for $35, that's a good price point. Okay, so instead of doing a top 5, did you have any other first bites before I?
No,
Okay.
I just going to remind you, maybe you should call out our Patreon backers.
Oh, that's what you do.
I do. I do it all the time. I'm giving. This is your show.
I, that annoys me when you say that. It's been how many years, and he still just won't take any ownership. Won't take. You're one of those people that just wants to deflect ownership, so you don't have to handle the complaints.
Yeah.
Is that it? No, definitely. We truly appreciate the any of the backers on the Patreon side, whether you're the highest level or one of the other levels. It's all good. We appreciate it. I know Tom and Vigor have been with us for a long time, and of course, we've got the other levels as well. But I would say that if you can't back Patreon, totally understand that. If you get the opportunity to support us in other ways of either retweets or give us reviews on iTunes or um, whatever platform I guess that you download it from. I'm assuming you can review on any of the platforms, not just iTunes, but that's the one I get on. And then or just give us a shout out on social media. If you just run into strangers at a game store, tell them about us, whisper it in their ear, get up real, just stroll up on them real lightly behind them and whisper it in their ear. So it creeps them out.
Leave flyers about the YouTube channel everywhere you go.
There you go.
Public transportation.
Yeah.
Places like that.
If you're riding public transportation, watch a YouTube video and just laugh hysterically. And people are like, what are you watching? Oh, it's a Board Game Buffet podcast.
Make sure you don't have your headphones in and just turn your phone volume up to its maximum.
Yeah, absolutely. All of those things work. All right, so instead of doing a top 5 this time, I thought we'd go back and we do a leftover or maybe a comfort food. I don't care which one you have, but it's something that we haven't done in a little while, and quite frankly, I thought it'd be nice to go back and take a look. And hard thing was remembering if I had talked about the game before. I do have a list somewhere. I just didn't look at it. So my leftover is a game called Tomorrow. It was put out by Conquistador Games, which then turned into Artania Games. And I don't know if Artania is still around or not. I think they maybe got absorbed into another company. But the designer is Dirk Niemeyer, who was the owner of both of those companies. And this game is it's a 4 to 6 player game, which is something that's not usually in my wheelhouse of the type of games that I'm going to buy. 4 to 6 players, plays in about 90 minutes, and it's ranked around 5,500 on BGG. The reason I bought this game was I saw it at an Origins game fair one year. Looked really interesting. Of course, they had it. I think if you backed it on Kickstarter, you got these big giant wooden pawns that came with it, which I don't know if those came with the original game or not. I don't think they did. I think maybe it was cubes. Or maybe they did come with the pawns. I don't remember. But anyways, it's a game board. It's basically it's a map of the world. And it's not an exact map. I mean, obviously they've got the, representation of the bigger powers and then some minor countries in there as well. But this game is about at the time, the near future of when this game was designed. So this game came out in 2013. So maybe it was predicting 2020 or 2021, but it's about the world and its overpopulation. The world is overpopulated, and the major powers, and there's 6 of them, and they have come together and they've decided, we need to do something to stop the path we're going down. So you are trying to correct the overpopulation and deal with the environmental change and deal with the resource depletion that's affecting the world. And the only way to do this is to have some global depopulation. And I know this sounds dark and it sounds, maybe not in the, let's say it's done in poor taste, but it may not be a subject matter that people want to sit down and play either. So in this game, you're playing one of these 6 superpowers or major powers. The US is represented, the European Union, China, Russia, the Arab Caliphate, and India is the other country. And so as one of those 6 superpowers, you are trying to work cooperatively, even though it's a semi-co-op game, but it is a cooperative style of game where you want to depopulate the world. And there's minor countries out there as well. Like Canada has one wooden pond. It's based off population size. I think Mexico is in there. You've got different a couple different areas in Africa. You've got some different areas in Asia and stuff. So there are what I would call neutral populations out there that aren't part of the superpowers. So more than likely, you're probably going to start maybe picking off some of those, depopulating those areas first. But you can't totally depopulate those areas because as one of these superpowers, you also want to try to build up your political credibility, your political presence in the world. And one of the ways to do that is to militarily kind of control these minor areas. But the only way you score any good points is if they still have population left in them at the end of the game. So you don't want to wipe them out totally, but you may want to wipe out the ones that you don't control. And so it's interesting from that standpoint. You have these different action cards you're gonna do over the game, and you're gonna play two of them on any turn. And there's like espionage and um I think cyber hacking or whatever, cyberspace, I think they is what it's called. And you're going to kind of determine how you're going to play these cards. There's also these disease cards, and you draw these disease cards, and when you play it, you put it down on the board face down so people can't see what it is, but other players can stop you from doing it by playing their espionage cards or counter espionage cards. So if Graham puts a disease card down and I think, oh man, he is going to go for me, or he's going to go for one of my areas that I want, ooh, that's going to be tough. I may want to play my counter espionage card to cancel it. Doesn't mean that he was actually going to do it, and I don't know what the effects would have been until it gets flipped over. But there's a lot of negotiation in this game. There's a lot of negotiation where I say, hey, listen, Bob, I think Graham's going to play this against you. We know he's going to play this against you, right? I mean, it's obvious that's where he's going to go. I'll tell you what, I'll play my counter espionage card to cancel that disease card if you promise not to pick on any of my population for the next couple of turns. Not that they're binding, but there's a lot of that in the game. And most of the disease card, I mean, all the disease cards are not good. And it deals with depopulating, and then they can potentially spread to adjacent areas on the board and depopulate part of them as well. Militarily, you can never attack the home area of another superpower, but you can play diseases against them. You can, I believe, you can use your nukes against them, or maybe the nukes you can't. I think you can play the nukes against them as well. I'd have to check on that, but it's one of those where, again, using nukes isn't necessarily, it's not good. I mean, because if I launch a nuke against Graham, I'm going to lose 3 victory points at the end of the game for every nuke I launch. If I control any territory, like any of the minor powers, if I militarily control them, but they've had a nuke launched against them, if I still control that land at the end, I'm going to lose 3 victory points for controlling basically a wasteland. So it's nukes are used, but they're pretty much a last resort style of thing because you don't want the negative points. When I say you're working cooperatively with each other on this, there's this track at the bottom of the board, and you kind of work your way around it, working your way down each of the different levels. Start out on the yellow level, you work your way down, you then loop around to the red level, you work your way down, and you loop around to the black level, and then finally at the very end of the black level, there's this little smiley face, and if you reach there, you have won the game, you've saved the world, you've depopulated it enough to where you guys can survive, and then you tally up who actually is the new superpower based off of the victory points that you get through the game. And you get victory points various ways. Some of them are through your strategy cards that you've collected over the game. Some of them are through I forget, there's another one you get. And then the main way you get it is as you're over the course of the game, as you're depopulating areas, you keep all those pawns that you've killed off, you keep them in front of you, and then they are worth certain points at the end of the game. And I can't remember if it's based off the country that they came from, or if it's based off of the country that you are, as to how they score. But the more you depopulate, the more points you get. if at any time, or if at the end of the game, and I think it's played over 9 turns, if you haven't reached the bottom, then everybody loses. So I've only played it once, and I played it at the con. We played it with a full group of players. We played the ones with all the big wooden bits. It was extremely fun. Played it with Nils Hertzman, who he was here in the US. Now he's back in Germany. He worked for Artana. He used to do a bunch of videos. I don't know if he's still doing videos on YouTube and stuff. He used to do stuff with the Dice Tower for Board Game Breakfast. Nils is, to me, I would say he is the perfect Bond villain. He's got the German accent. He is very eccentric and over the top. And so playing with him in a game like this with negotiation and back and forth was a lot of fun. So that probably skewed me to enjoying it and also to wanting to buy it. I didn't buy it at the con. I actually got it, found it in the aftermarket, and picked it up. There's only one game for sale on BGG, and that's in Europe. And it does generally go for a decent price. But I know we were going to play this one year at a ModCon, and I think Graham looked at it and he didn't, I don't know if it was a negotiation he didn't care for. I know you made a comment that it was very American centric, whatever that was supposed to mean. And so we never ended up playing it, but I think with the right group of people, you would enjoy it, even though I know you really don't enjoy semi co-op or negotiation. But I think from the standpoint of just the sheer amount of, sorry, but this disease is going against you sort of thing, I think you would enjoy it. And thematically, I don't think that the theme puts you off, because I know the type of games that you like, but maybe it does.
No, it's definitely not the theme that put me off. And it's one that when you first told me about it, I wanted to try it. So that's why I asked you to bring it to ModCon. When I was reading the rules, yes, it was the negotiation with the semi co-op that I said, I'm not so sure about this game, because it seemed to be, because there was that negotiation piece, and with if you didn't all work together to get the track down and then you see who won, that's not my favorite type of semi co-op. And I just felt that for the group that we had, I didn't think it was going to work very well. Right. I think if you had the right group of people that do enjoy negotiation games, because at that ModCon, I think Megan and B were there, and the three of us aren't. Well, Megan and I don't really like negotiation. B is more of a negotiator than Megan and I are. So it was like, okay, this isn't going to, if only Dean and B are willing to negotiate, and Megan and I don't enjoy that, it's probably not going to work in that environment. Right. But if you had, I could see if you did have 4 people, how it could be a hilarious game about wiping off the population from the earth.
Yeah. And again, I think it's going to be group dependent. It's definitely going to be group dependent, but it's one where I don't think I've seen anything ever similar about it, as far, I mean, maybe there are, but it's definitely is a different theme. And it's out of print. I don't know. I don't think it would ever come back in print, just based off of the design. But anyways, so that's my first bite tomorrow by Conquistador Games. And
it wasn't your first bite, it was your leftover.
I'm sorry, my leftover tomorrow by Conquistador Games. Conquistador.
So my leftover is, Dean and I have been talking about the supply lines of the American Revolution, the Southern Strategy, and we briefly touched on the logistics of that. And if you listen to our War Game podcast, we go into more about that and how much I enjoy that. So I was kind of going through my collection going, what game do I want to get back to the table? And we'd also mentioned Rhine River Trader, which I believe was on one of my lists before for leftover. So I couldn't pick that again. So I figured, what game do I have that's long, that has terrible components, that's all about logistics? That's a game by Splotter called Roads and Boats.
I was gonna say, I know technically you can use it because it's not a top 5 list. I thought you were gonna say Food Chain Magnate, like, well, you're finding a loophole.
No, that Food Chain Magnate is definitely not logistics. But Roads and Boats is unfortunately Splotter's known for this, really crappy components. but you're going to set up a bunch of hexes on the table based on the scenario you want to play. So in the book, it will give you a whole bunch of scenarios. Like if you want to play this scenario, set out the tiles like this. The tiles going to represent the different types of terrain: river, pastures, woodlands, mountains, things like that. You're then going to place a plastic acrylic sheet over it, because you are actually going to be drawing on the game board with markers. Each person there are hundreds of little chits in this game, but they all represent resources and what those resources can be turned into. So you're going to have trees, which can be cut down, which means you have logs. Those logs can be transported into boards. Those boards can be made into houses, and those houses can be upgraded to factories. Those factories can, that type of thing. So each one of those stages is going to be a chit. So your goal is, you start off with 3 donkeys. The only resources that you own are the resources on your donkey. So let's say you start off with one hut or house where you reside, and you can start to draw roads. That's why it's called Roads and Boats. You can actually draw your roads on the acrylic sheet, and that's how you connect all the things together. So of course you want to be able to build a road from where you are to where the forest is, for example, because you want to start cutting down trees. So you do that, and then you figure, well, I have all these logs. I want to be able to convert them into boards. So for that, you need a factory to convert the logs into boards. Someone needs to cut the boards to the proper shape so you can use them for construction. So you build the factory, and the factory is built by you, but it's not yours. And all the items in the factory aren't yours. So if I bring my donkey and he's carrying two logs on it, my donkey will drop it off at the factory. The factory will take those logs and convert them into boards. If I move my donkey away, those boards are up for grabs. I've basically left them behind. Now, if my donkey was there, I can put them right on my donkey. Now they're my boards again. But if Dean is sneaking around in the woods with his donkey, I say, okay, because it's going to take one turn for them to convert the logs into boards, I'm going to move my donkey, maybe have him pick more boards up so I can drop boards and do an exchange. And all of a sudden, Dean pops out of the woods. He can take my boards once they're done, because they're not mine. They're only possession when they're on some sort of your transportation. And you're going to be able to get donkeys. You're going to be able to get boats. They're going to be able to travel down the river. Again, they can carry your resources. But the idea is you're going to be getting resources, then you need to build the places that can process them to get them to be better resources. But it's the whole logistical thing of, do I wait for my boards to be finished, but Dean is on the other side of the board, so I don't have to worry about that. So I can go off. I can maybe start doing something with building fences to keep my chickens in, or my geese. That's one of the jokes that we always talk about bee. Is I was playing this with Megan and Bee one time, and I had built a boat, and the river kind of ran by Bee's farmyard, and he had a whole bunch of geese that he was breeding. So I just drove by and just loaded a whole bunch of geese into my boat and kept on going. He's like, well, you can't take my geese. I said, again, they're not your geese if they're out in the wild. So I just stole his geese and moved them to my farm area. So it's a game where it can be interactive. It is a long game, but it is all about the logistics of how to get the resources you need, how to get them to the factories, then how do you take the stuff from the factories to, again, where you need, because you can, you may want to build a gold mine. Well, you need higher end materials to build that. I want to build a boat. Well, with the basic materials, you can build a very basic boat that can carry one resource. But I want a steamer engine, for example. I can't remember what the levels of boats are. Well, for that, you need steel. Well, to get steel, you need to get the ore from the mountains. You need to get the wood to burn, and you need, whatever to actually make the ore and steel and all that. So I really enjoy it. Like any Splatter game, the rule set is relatively simple, but you have so many choices at the beginning of the game that you can get lost for. Like a lot of other games, the first couple of rounds, you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea what my strategy is going to be. There's a forest that's close to me. I guess I'll go get wood, but what am I going to do with the wood? I don't know yet. As the game goes on, you start to develop your strategy, because you're going to start building up your roads, and what are your roads next to? because of course it costs you resources to build your roads. And do you want to get a cart to go with your donkey, or do you want to sell your donkey and maybe get a horse which can go faster than your donkey but can't carry as much? Or do I want to concentrate on building boats? Well, the boats need piers to land on, but they can carry more goods, but they can get around the board faster because they're going with the river. That's just the style of game I enjoy. This is definitely on the heavier and longer side, and it's one that has never. If someone says I want to play a long splatter game, it's not my first choice, and I think that's why it's in my leftover pile, because I do enjoy it, but I'm going to pick the unnameable one first, and then probably Antiquity. And so Roads and Boats is always one that kind of gets left behind, because it's not my first choice for that. But if you said I want to have but want to play a logistics game, and unfortunately for me, the amount of people that want to play a logistics game in my group of friends and people I play with is one, and that's me. So to say, hey, do you want to sit down and play a 3-hour logistics game? Most people will say, no, let's play something else. So it's hard to get to the table, but it is one that, because I like that mechanism, the whole logistics and supply chain management, I find it fascinating in Roads and Boats. I just can't get to the table, which is why it's my leftover.
So are there short splatter games?
Out of the ones I have played, no, they're
Okay.
all long.
But I was thrown by your comment when you said if someone wants to play a long splatter game, like I didn't know there were short ones.
Well, okay, a long logistical game that happens to be a splatter. Because
Okay.
there are logistical games which you can play like in an hour and a half. This is, you have probably built up your farm in the first hour, and then you start thinking of, okay, what am I going to be doing next?
So when you build your roads, can only you use your roads, or anyone can
Nope.
use your roads?
Anyone can use your roads. They're like
Okay.
typical roads. But again, you're going to be building them from where you start. So if I start on this side of the board and you start from that side of the board, maybe eventually they'll connect. And maybe that's one of your strategies, is to kind of piggyback off someone else's work.
Right. Does it tell you for the scenario, like where to draw the river? I'm assuming
the river is on the tiles.
The river's on the tiles. I gotcha. I didn't realize. I haven't played it. I didn't realize that it was one where you drew like a cran rail game. That you did that for Roads and Boats.
Yeah,
interesting. Is there like because I know they have made different versions of this game, and you've got like it's a big box to begin with, but
yeah.
Did they make a version where maybe they give you like the little wooden matchstick pieces to represent your roads, so you don't have to do the drawing? Or
no, I believe they've always kept the drawing. There is the 20th anniversary out now. Mm-hmm. This game is old. That there was an expansion called Etc. So it was Roads and Boats and Etc. The 20th anniversary has that included in the base game, and that upgrades some of your transportation pieces, I want to say. But I don't think it upgrades anything else. It just basically gives you the expansion for it.
Is it the typical splatter game where the chits are like really, really small for no apparent reason?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'd be interested. I've always been intrigued by it, just because it was a splatter game, but the way you described it, yeah, I'd definitely, I'd like to give that a try. I don't care about the game length as long as it's enjoyable.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like any splatter game, you can dig your own hole.
Yeah, that's okay.
If you decide to go heavy on forest and you deplete all your forest and you don't have enough stuff to build roads to get to another forest, well, sorry, you're stuck. You should have seen that coming.
Right. Would you, as far as a supply logistics game, would you rather play this or Rhine River Trade?
Depends how much.
I know they're different.
They're different because Rhine River Trade is about fulfilling contracts. So you have a goal, like you need to get these goods from here to here. How are you going to do it the most efficiently? So that is much quicker. This is the supply chain that you're building up lasts for the entire game, and you're going to be using it each time. So this one feels more like a true logistics and supply chain management game. Well, Rhine River Trader is more of just the not simple logistics, but just trying to minimize the cost of your logistical network.
Okay. Well, it sounds intriguing. I'd like to give it a play, but right by now, I think I'd play almost anything just because I haven't been getting a lot of games played. So Munchkin's sounding really fun right about now. All right. Anything else that you want to add to the episode?
it was funny because the when we first said we're going to do a leftover, I was going to pick Eclipse.
Mm.
And then the more I thought about it, it's like, you know what? As much as I enjoy Eclipse, it's been one I haven't played since I bought it a long time ago. And I have the original copy of Eclipse, not the new one that just came out from Console Games was involved with that, weren't they?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly who
Yeah.
is officially.
And I think the reason why I picked Roads and Boats is because I think it's the space theme, honestly. I think I find more enjoyment of, so if you haven't played Eclipse, Eclipse is a very Euro version of, you know, a space exploration game, which I enjoy because you're building up technologies, you're trading stuff, you're upgrading your ships and to make them stronger. You have a tech tree that you're going on, all stuff I love. But and maybe this is why people don't like Roads and Boats. Roads and Boats feels like you're doing a job because you're dealing with wood, you're dealing with ore, you're dealing with how am I going to get up from point A to point B. You're worrying about, you know, getting resources to build your extra stuff. It feels as if you were like a city planner, but it does feel like you're actually doing a real job. And some people really don't like that. I happen to like that, which is why I decided to go with Roads and Boats over Eclipse.
Yeah, I think I'm finally maybe I've burrowed into your brain enough to where I'm starting to turn you against the space theme. My work is slowly becoming successful on that. Yeah, I maybe for me I think it's because space isn't that big of a draw to me because I maybe I just enjoy like the actual real stuff like okay you're getting wood you're you know or you're raising cattle that sort of thing, whereas with the space thing it's like oh you know you move along this tech tree and you know and you've now developed this super laser or, you know they give it some sort of fancy name and or whatever, and to me I'm just like I don't connect with that. It's not like something I'm drawn into, not that I wouldn't play it, but it's it definitely wouldn't be one that if it was a great logistics game with a space theme, I probably it'd be pretty far down on my list unless the gameplay was that spectacular.
And I think so, you know, I'm always a mechanisms over theme. But for me, if the theme can support the mechanisms or vice versa, that would elevate a game for me.
All right.
So let's say you had a really interesting theme, but the mechanisms had nothing to do with the theme. I don't care about the theme. With something like Eclipse, like you said, because it's out in space, me moving up on a tech tree doesn't feel connected to the theme. It does somewhat, but the Roads and Boats, the theme and the mechanisms are so tightly combined that it makes 100% sense. Why am I building a road? I'm building a road so I can get my workers, my donkeys, my transportation to where they need to go. That makes perfect sense. Why am I cutting down the trees? Because I want to build a factory. Well, you need materials to build a factory. It just makes sense that I need the wood and I need to fell it and then get it processed to give me boards I can use for construction. That's the type of theme that I love. It doesn't necessarily matter what the theme is, but when the theme and mechanisms just make 100% sense, that does elevate the game for me.
Right. Yeah, the whole idea of okay, my donkey carries more, moves slower than the horse. I get why I would want to upgrade to a horse. I want to move faster. I'm sacrificing this. You know, on a tech tree, it's like, oh, my spaceship goes, you know, from 4 engines to 6 engines. I get it, but you know, it's fake.
Yeah.
I mean, not that we don't have, you know, we do have shuttles. Would you consider a shuttle a spaceship? I don't know, but you know, or progressing up, and you know, oh look, you know, Graham's developed the intergalactic colon blaster or whatever, and you know, it's a personal choice. I know that people love the space theme and all that sort of thing, but yeah, not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
All right, I was going to ask you something else, and I trying to think what it was.
What? How about the top 5 next Splatter games we're going to play?
Well, you won't play Food Chain Magnate with me, and I doubt that you want to have to explain to me how the docks work in antiquity.
So which
for the
leaves
100th time,
Indonesia and Roads and Boats.
Great Zimbabwe?
I don't own Great Zimbabwe.
Okay.
Because
I hear that's really good.
Yeah, Great Zimbabwe and Indonesia were reprinted at the same time at $120 a game. It's like I didn't think I wanted to spend $250 on 2 Splatter games back to back. Now I kind of regret it. Now I do wish I did have the Great Zimbabwe. Right. So I'm trying to pick that up. But
well, I think so. Right, they just did a reprint of that, didn't they? Or they're doing another reprint.
So my Indonesia is a couple of years old, and that's when it was reprinted. And I thought the Great Zimbabwe was reprinted around the same time a couple of years ago.
Yeah, but I want to.
Another one?
I thought that they were doing another version or another printing of Great Zimbabwe. Because I know people were talking about, oh man, I just bought that on the aftermarket. I should have waited. But maybe they were referring to it from 2 years ago. I'm not sure. But anyways. All right. Well, I think that's going to wrap up this episode of the Board Game Buffet podcast. It's a short one compared to normal, but that's good, right? Get you back outside, breathing in that fresh summer air.
But actually, speaking of that, so Dean and I have been discussing the length of the podcast, and we noticed that when we went to video, they started to stretch a little bit. I would love to know what people think. Do they prefer the shorter, snappier? I mean, this one is about half an hour shorter than the last several. Do people like the shorter episodes, or they like to hear us ramble more? Because we could ramble on about a whole bunch of things, but we are consciously trying to make them back down to the hour and a half time frame.
Yeah, and if there's something within the episodes that you either would wish there's more of, and I know the easy thing with that would be well, talk about more different, more games every episode versus, only 2 or 3. And that's easier said than done because you have to be able to play the games to be able to talk about them. But do you think the banner is too long? Do you like the banner? Don't like the banner? Do you think when we talk about the first bites, do we spend too much time talking about like how the game works versus what we thought about the game? Delving too far into the weeds, that sort of thing. And we do want to bring back, if you well, not just if you like that, you may like this, but also the Iron Chef. And I think if we do the Iron Chef, I'm not sure how we're going to implement that. We're trying to figure out a way of maybe getting some other people involved, but also would it be a standalone? Because if we do that, they're going to get long. So would that be a standalone episode, or would we just do that in a video format? I don't know. There's things that we've been discussing, but yeah, any feedback, insight, suggestions would be definitely appreciated.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, as always, please take care of yourselves and your loved ones. See ya.
See ya.